Few African countries continued to maintain diplomatic links with Israel following the 1973 war, with the majority severing ties. However, the tide has drastically shifted today. Around 30 African nations have established embassies or consulates in Tel Aviv, and 44 of the 54 African nations now recognize Israel as a sovereign state. According to Tighisti Amare, Deputy Director of the Africa Program at the London-based Chatham House think tank, Israel's role as one of the world's leaders in agricultural technologies is a very attractive incentive for African countries battling insecurity and for economies with arid and semi-arid lands. She continued, as a result, many African nations have chosen to exercise their agency in separate political positions from economic interests in international fora. It goes beyond agriculture, though. Alhaji Buba Nuhu, a lecturer at the University of Bordeaux, claimed that trade and security concerns have also led to many African nations being more friendly with Israel. An important turning point occurred in 1978 when Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords. Nuhu told Al Jazeera, after the Camp David agreements, things really started to change. Numerous African countries concluded it was in their best interests to remain neutral when a significant Arab nation signed a peace agreement with Israel. Following the 1993 Oslo Accords, which also signaled the end of the Cold War, the fall of the South African apartheid government, and the prospect of peace between Israel and the African countries, this trend acquired additional impetus. More recently, Israel has achieved significant victories on the continent with the normalization agreements reached with Chad, Morocco, and Sudan. Despite being one of Israel's harshest opponents on the continent, South Africa is by far its largest trading partner in Africa. Trade worth about $750 million was conducted in 2021 between Israel and sub-Saharan African nations. Israel supplies the continent with chemicals, technology, and machinery. Of that, Israel traded goods worth $129 million with Nigeria in 2021, and roughly two-thirds with South Africa. Palestine and South Africa engage in trade. Between 2009 and 2021, Palestinian exports of olive oils and other foodstuffs increased by 34%. However, Israel's relationships with other countries go beyond commerce. It has been providing Ethiopia with millions of dollars worth of humanitarian aid for decades. Numerous Ethiopian Jews have migrated to Israel. Israel's foreign aid organization, Mashiv, has also brought in Kenyan students to train in agriculture and medical and taught Senegalese business owners management skills. Meanwhile, it's thought that Israeli forces are helping longtime leader Paul Biya in Cameroon by providing training to the Bir, an elite, fierce army unit that reports directly to the president. According to claims in the Israeli media, Israel is also training soldiers in several African countries. A summit between Israel and Africa was slated to take place in 2017, however it was cancelled due to a crisis in the host nation, Togo. However, earlier in the year, Netanyahu said, Israel is coming back to Africa, and Africa is coming back to Israel, while addressing leaders of West African countries at a conference in Liberia. But despite all of these successes, Israel has still encountered difficulties in Africa. Elaline Admasu, Israel's ambassador to the African Union, was encouraged by earlier gains to pursue Israel's application for observer status in the organization in 2021. Despite the request being approved, Algeria and South Africa objected to the action, which led to Israel's status being suspended in February. In contrast, Palestine has maintained its status as an observer of the OAS since 2013. Duplicitous governments. Therefore, are African governments behaving hypocritically in regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict, boosting their trade and ties with Israel while simultaneously defending Palestine, at least in certain cases? Experts refer to the recent divide in viewpoints following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 and argue that neither their seeming contradiction nor the divisions within Africa on the matter are surprising. Amare of Chatham House recalled that, when the war broke out, a third of African countries chose to remain neutral in the UN vote condemning Russia's invasion, even though Russia's invasion of a sovereign country was not condoned. This is not unusual, and it is generally misguided to expect African countries to respond to a crisis in the same way, the speaker stated. Another example is that in a 2017 UN emergency meeting, African nations unanimously voted against the US decision to open an embassy in contested Jerusalem, despite their growing ties with Israel. Furthermore, trade relations may soon be impacted by politics. The director of the South African advocacy group Africa for Palestine, Mohamed Desai, told Al Jazeera that although South Africa is the main source of Israel's trade with the continent, civil society is putting more and more pressure on Pretoria to adopt a more pronounced pro-Palestine stance. Desai stated, "A resolution to downgrade South Africa's diplomatic relations and embassy in Israel was passed by the parliament last year." He said, "As of right now, South Africa does not have an ambassador in Israel. As civil society, we are calling on our government to go above and beyond. A boycott of all public and private sector trade and relations with Israel is necessary. Such calls should increase if Israel maintains its lethal bombardment of Gaza and a land invasion ensues." Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.